This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt stuck, whether it's a major life transition, a dark night of the soul, or just staying small out of fear. If you've ever struggled to move forward, if you're repeating unhealthy patterns in relationships, or you have a black belt in beating yourself up, you were meant for more, and this podcast is for you. We'll get real, we'll get vulnerable, we'll probably cuss a little bit, and we'll get to the root of it all, your self-worth. With every step, you'll find the courage to rise. Today we're going to talk about self-forgiveness, why it's so important, and what tends to keep us stuck and unable to forgive ourselves. I did a post the other day on Instagram talking about the importance of self-forgiveness, and that self-forgiveness is one of the keys that opens the door to healing and feeling better in our life. And there's an interesting phenomenon that happens as we grow, and especially when we're doing work on ourselves. And by doing work, I mean any kind of personal development, any kind of self-realization. There's this concept that happens where we go through a cycle of grieving what we didn't know and grieving the version of us in the past that didn't know what we know now. It's like you have your eyes open to this new thing and you look back and go, oh, I wish I knew that then. If only I had known that then, I wouldn't have created so much pain for myself, created so much suffering, done X, Y, and Z. It's this energy of if only I had known that then. And there is a natural grieving process that happens when we can look back and see so clearly that, yeah, man, if I had just known that then I wouldn't have made that particular choice, or I would have made a different choice. But here's the thing, and this is where we get sideways on that, is rather than acknowledging that that is a very natural part of the cycle of moving into the next version of you. And it can be a nuanced version, right? It's just learning and uncovering that next layer. And when you look back, there's a grieving process of, oh, if only that precious version of me had known what I know now, things could have been different. But staying stuck in that, there are two elements to that. First and foremost, none of us can go back in time and change what happened in the past. I have tried. Trust me, it's not possible. So we waste a lot of energy. And yes, I say waste. We waste a lot of energy looking back at the past and lamenting things we didn't know, could have done different, should have done different, all of those things. This is one of the energies that keeps us stuck in the past and keeps us stuck in the low vibration. The second energy that goes along with that is the inherent energy of shame, which is you have sort of the grieving that comes with not having known that before, or now knowing something different where you might have made a different choice in that same situation. And then you marry that with the shame that comes along with that. And shame is different than guilt. So guilt is the energy of I did something bad. Shame is the energy of I am bad. And those two energies are fundamentally two of the very lowest energetic vibrations that we can be in. And here's the trick with shame. When we are stuck in shame, it's as if we are hiding in the corner under a very, very heavy blanket. And anytime that we are kept in hiding, we fundamentally cannot move forward. We fundamentally cannot heal. And we are keeping ourselves trapped in suffering. And so this is one of the reasons why it's so important to understand what shame looks and feels like in your body so that you can move from shame into self-forgiveness. And this includes cycling through the uncomfortable elements that come with sort of that grieving process, right? Honor the fact that you're grieving the version of you that didn't know what you know now. And it's okay that sometimes it feels a little cringy and uncomfortable when you look back from this place now of knowing what you now know, looking back on the past and going, oof. But that's where the self-compassion comes in. And this is also where the self-forgiveness comes in. The self-compassion is not beating yourself up for not knowing then what you know now. It's having compassion on that past version of you that was still learning and that did the very best they could at the time with what they knew at the time. And as the Maya Angelou quote goes, when you know better, you do better. But it starts with self-forgiveness, because otherwise you keep yourself trapped in the shame spiral. And I want to be clear, just like I always say, none of this is an excuse for bad behavior, or none of it is a way to no longer be responsible to ourselves or to other people. That's not at all what I mean. But we get stuck on the wrong side of this coin. If your actions legitimately caused pain and suffering to somebody else, then yes, you are accountable for your actions and you are accountable for your behavior. But taking accountability and beating yourself up are two very different things. And beating yourself up, that's usually where most people get stuck. Beating yourself up is inherently the vibration of shame. And when you're stuck in beating yourself up, you're not moving forward. And you're not able to take effective accountability because you're too busy kicking your own ass around the block. And listen, we have all done things in our lives that have impacted other people in a way that is very, very regrettable. And that's the part where we feel the discomfort in our body. And rather than getting stuck in the cycle of shame, we feel the discomfort. We learn from what happened. We learn, wow, what was my behavior? What were the actions that I took that led to this? And rather than staying stuck in the shame spiral, we take accountability for it and go, yep, this is uncomfortable. I made some decisions that hurt somebody else. I take accountability for that. And my part of this is that I'm going to choose to learn from this. Rather than telling yourself a story that you are bad for what happened, you choose to see instead that this is something that you're going to learn from. Because what happens when we're staying in that shame is that it's only reinforcing those negative stories that we have about ourselves. They're inherently untrue, but the more and more we reinforce them, the more and more meaning we place on things that we do that reinforce those stories, the louder it gets and the worse it gets. So if the actions that you took before you had this awareness that you have now negatively impacted somebody in your life, take accountability for that. Own your side of the street. Don't make excuses for it. Own your side of the street. And where appropriate and when appropriate, apologize and own that behavior. And then learn from it and move forward from it. Because keeping yourself stuck and beating yourself up for what happened in the past is keeping you in shame. It's keeping you in a very, very low vibration, which these are laws of physics, inherently attracts more of the same low vibration. So you move out of that by acknowledging the discomfort when you reflect back on that event. Acknowledge the discomfort. Forgive that version of you that made those choices, that did what they did at the time with what they knew, and honor that this version of you now knows differently. And I had somebody reach out to me after my post and say, well, what if I knew better at the time? And my response to that was, well, inherently you didn't, or you would have made a different choice, right? You may have had inklings of the awareness. Sometimes we do know that things that we're doing are not the appropriate choice, that it may ultimately hurt somebody else, and some part of us continues on with that. But rather than beating yourself up over it and staying in shame, learn from it and ask yourself the question from a place of neutrality, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of neutrality. Wow, if I did have some awareness of this, why did I make that decision? And again, I use the word neutrality because that's a very important energy to come from, because the energy of judgment is just an extension of shame. So reflect back on that past version of you with compassion and with neutrality. And from that place, forgive that past version of you. And sometimes it's not an action that we've taken against someone else or towards someone else. Sometimes it's an action that we took ourselves or that we did, or something we said, or a behavior we engaged in, or a decision that we made where we hold a lot of shame around our past actions. And again, that will keep us in this dark, dark place of I am bad. And that is the inherent message that we're telling ourselves when we cannot step out of shame and into self-forgiveness. And like most things, it's not a switch, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but it's you consciously becoming aware when you feel that vibration of shame, when you start to notice yourself telling yourself those stories about you having taken actions that you feel so very bad about, so very, very low about, and instead forgiving that past version of you. Forgive the version of you that didn't know what you know now, because that version of you, that past version of you, could not have done any different than what they did with what they knew at the time. And now, having listened to this podcast, we've raised your awareness even more about what it means to be in shame and why it's so important to step into self-forgiveness. So now we can say that you know a little better than you did a few minutes ago. And so now, next time when you really feel yourself stuck in that shame spiral, stuck in beating yourself up, you know that you can take a breath and make a different choice now. And that choice is as simple as, all right, beating myself up a little bit, not the workout I thought it was going to be. So let's maybe stop that, because I remember now that when I keep myself in this vibration of shame, I'm keeping myself down. And the way out of this is instead to take a deep breath, to feel through the discomfort, to honor the fact that I made some choices at the time that weren't really in alignment with what I wanted. Those choices are made. I cannot go back in the past. I can only move forward. And so from this place, I'm going to move forward by forgiving that version of me and making the next right choice the next time something like that presents itself to me. I will learn from the things that happened in the past. I will be curious from a neutral place about why I behaved a certain way. And I will know that all I can do is move forward and make the next right choice. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Courage to Rise podcast. Visit my website, couragetorise.com, for more information on one-on-one coaching, group coaching programs, and other upcoming events. Remember, life's too short not to sparkle. Sparkle on.